other guests, but Neela Richardson's one of my favourite guests. She's the chief economist at ADP, and Karen, I was so thrilled when you came last time. So no pressure this time at all. Look, seriously, Neela, I have a problem, and the whole market has a problem, and that we are all, well, we're all data-driven anyway. I always thought we should have been, but we're hanging on to every single nuance in the jobs market at the moment, whether it's your report, whether it's the JOLTS data, whether it's the weekly jobless case, or whether it's the BLS data as well, the Bureau of Labour Department. I don't know what's going on in the US jobs market. I reckon 95% of that lot out there watching the show don't know, but I'm going to ask you that $64,000 question. What is going on in the US labour market?
That's a fantastic question.
Is there clarity?
You know, we've gone from being data-driven, which I love, to being data-dependent. So you're right.
And every little terrified.
Maybe data-obsessed. We can go on. But the overall big picture of the U.S. jobs market is that it's solid. It's solid, but it is softening. It's cooling. That was a big statement that we're going to see a cool down, but it's probably...
You're with me on that one, aren't you?
It's probably because we saw in the private sector data that ADP looks at very carefully. We pay about 20% of the U.S. workforce, a steep decline in September. Now, people assume that things work in a straight line, but we can often see a weak month sandwiched between two strong months. Yeah. We see it all the time in all kinds of different data. So we need a couple of months to really establish a trend. The key here is overall solid, but that doesn't mean that we'll get a sub 100,000 number later this morning.
There's a couple too. You speak about wanting a few more weaker numbers to kind of give that clear sense. Is a couple 2, 3? I mean, how many would be a fair requisite on that one?
I mean, for economists who tend to be slow-moving, 3 months is ideal, but the markets move a lot faster. Markets often move before the data is released to begin with. But overall, if you look at other things other than just the monthly report, you see that participation rate is back up for prime-age workers. That's a big deal. More people are going into the labor market. That means that certain tensions are easing, and you can see that in average pay. It's starting to slow. So people who are worried about inflation and wages really propping up inflation, there is no evidence, I don't think you'll see it in this report or in the ADP payroll report, of wages accelerating. In fact, they've been steadily declining all year, and that's a big deal for the Fed too. It's not just the jobs number, it's how much companies are paying to get workers in the door. That has definitely taken a step back.
Yeah, we've been speaking about it the whole year, well, for more than a year actually, in fact, and that's a recession, right? That dreaded R word. But I want to know if you're perhaps on a recession warning or if you're perhaps on recession watch, and I feel like perhaps a little bit
it's like a slightly
different, right? Slightly different in their sense then. Where would you be? I mean, a warning feels like that's more imminent than just perhaps a watch, which we pretty much have been for over a year.
You know, recession, saying that there's going to be a recession is like saying it's going to rain without giving a date or a time. Yeah. So, yeah, eventually, recession is always a risk, but whether the risk is imminent or not, that is harder to call. Yeah. If you look at the jobs market, with under 4% unemployment in the United States, that's very close to historical lows. It's hard to call a recession just by looking at the jobs picture right now.
I had a question for you, but you've now got me to change it with your last answer. Saying there's a recession is like saying it's going to rain. Unless you're one of these mad governments somewhere in the world who tries to not let it rain because they've got a special parade or they've got the Olympics or something as well. I'm not naming any number of governments.
It's a lot of control.
Don't get ourselves into an international incident. It's the end of the week. I just want to get home. But there are too many times central banks, added to the actions of government, have tried to negate the risk of having a recession because they're terrified of the consequences as well. And it's been the big change in central bank policy, I think, over the last 20 years, is that we don't want a recession in the equation for all kinds of reasons. I think that's bad. I think the recessions can sometimes actually be rejuvenating for economies as well. So I hear what you're saying about recessions potentially are like it's going to rain. But in the same way that those, dare I say it, cloud-busting governments around the world are there, have the central bankers overstepped the mark trying to negate the downside risks to economies?
Well, that is the past 10 years of U.S. economic growth, of rock-bottom interest rates.
And Draghi and others as well.
Right. So this was an economy built on very close to zero interest rates for 10 years of economic expansion. And that was okay because inflation was super low. But now inflation has awakened. And if you look at demographic trends, labor shortages are not going away. It's getting better better, but there's still, that's a structural change in the labor market because of the aging of the U.S. population. So what that means is inflation is always going to be a risk. It's going to prop up. And so going back to zero or near rock bottom interest rates is going to be difficult to support the economy. This is an economy that the training wheels have come off in the U.S. and now people have to ride on a regular bike, businesses and consumers.
And they don't like it.
And well, it's new. It's new because...
Well, it's not new for someone my age.
Okay, we're going back to a more normal historical period.
And that's terrifying for people who have lived with zero interest rates. I want to move on because you at ADP, because you look at jobs, have always lived with this moniker, oh, well, it's a lagging indicator. Oh, it's a lagging indicator. You know, your PMIs, ISMs, they're forward-looking indicators. Jobs is a lagging indicator. But we're out to the lagging indicator, the concern that interest rate moves have cumulative and lagged effects. Again, the word comes back in a different form as well. How concerned are you that actually the jobs picture is just not showing you what's going to happen next? Again, and I'm sure you hate this question or love it in the same way as well, because you've probably got a very robust answer for that.
Well, first of all, ADP data is weekly, so we don't think of it as lagging in the traditional sense. It's actually pretty high frequency, and we can get a real-time measure of it. I think there's a feedback loop that is underappreciated. People say the labor market or the jobs picture is lagging, but the jobs picture is actually feeding current Federal Reserve policy. So it's not going in just one direction. There's a feedback loop in between, and these effects can amplify. So a simple relationship no longer exists. We are in a complex period of the global economy, not just the U.S., and the actions taken by the Fed affect the labor market, but vice versa. And so we can't just say, oh, this is lagging. You know, 6 to 9 months of Fed policy is going to show up in the labor market. The labor market is driving Fed policy now.
How do you see the strikes currently happening in the U.S., though? I mean, that's going to eventually play into the market somewhat. You have Ford saying that they're going to let go of some as well. Does that make this data look better than it maybe will look at some stage?
Depends on where you're looking.
Yeah, I suppose so.
In terms of the official government numbers, it's going to be hard for them to pick up strikes because of when they happen relative to the reference week. That's a technical methodological that you're not, maybe people aren't that interested in. But it might show up in pay. In manufacturing pay, and hourly pay. And the thing about that is when we have such pay transparency, which is another structural change underappreciated in the labor market now, workers can point to pay changes in other industries and other occupations and say, hey, I want that too. And so it does put kind of a floor on certainly those affected jobs in those striking industries, but also it's a place of transparency for other workers who are looking for higher wage increases as well.
Sector by sector, it's a fascinating picture. It's obviously much talked about that some of the highest paid sectors out there are really struggling. Deal making in the banking sector, consultancies as well, all the affiliated industries from legal to marketing, whatever it may well be. IT, some of the best paid jobs from San Francisco to the East Coast, they've gone because of concerns about a slowdown in the technology sector as well. Is that manifesting itself anywhere at all in your data, that the higher paid traditionally way above the median salaried jobs, that they're actually not around so much as they were?
Yeah, professional business services actually was weak. We saw job losses in our data. Information technology, it's been struggling this year. So it's not just interest rate sensitive sectors like manufacturing. It's also these professional jobs that firms really hired a lot during the pandemic economy, and they've reversed that hiring. So large firms have pulled back their hiring a lot in the U.S., and it's really smaller firms over-concentrated in consumer-facing industries like leisure and hospitality that are picking up that slack. But yes, to your point, those big paying jobs are not as abundant as they used to be.
Okay, and just a couple of answers ago, did you want to go back to why your methodology is better than the BLS? Or is that just kind of, you know, something that's just just a bit of competition between the ADP and BLS?
No competition, complementary. We're data driven, more data is better. Data obsessed maybe,
but yours is more current potentially, is that what you're saying? We take weekly sampling.
You want to say it, it's okay.
Neela, lovely to see you. We've got to leave it there, but But honestly, every time you're in London, we always want to see you. So thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
Neela Richardson, who is Chief Economist at